I'm Mara Webster at the In Creative Company, and today I'm thrilled to be talking about the wonderful film Day of the Fight. I'm joined today by writer and director Jack Huston, along with cast members Michael Pitt and Nicolette Robinson. Jack, I wanted to start with a question for you because I love how much this story is really about how much we root for the people in our lives around us, and it's really all about these interpersonal relationships and just these little vignettes of people that you connect to throughout the course of a day and how we interact with each other in the world. And I was just really curious about when you were writing the script, how you really used that as a lot of the framework for all of these interactions and how all of these characters come together in the story.
Well, actually, funny enough, it's when I was sort of like coming up with the story, it was about a boxer on the day of a prize fight. And as soon as I added that, what if this day wasn't just any day, but maybe his last day? We asked ourselves that question of what would you do? Who would you see? What would you say to them? What would you speak about? And it's amazing once you add, up the ante and you put that as, Irish Mike's maybe final hours. It's amazing how selfless you become because you don't want anything anymore. What you want to do is you want to give. You want to give. And obviously writing, for Michael, and having his voice in my head and those interactions, it's sort of beautiful because, rarely in life do you do stuff that's entirely selfless. I always said it's like this saintly act that he's doing on this day. It's the first time he's truly able, what he's doing by giving everything to everybody else, he is, at the same time learning to forgive himself for what he's done because it's a beautiful sentiment in it where it says the people in your life, the people that really matter, are far more willing to forgive than you might expect. All it takes sometimes is a conversation, and not a conversation where you want anything, just a conversation. And that's the beautiful line where Nicolette says, I wish we could have spoken like this when it matters. And he goes, well, it still matters because it always matters. Right to the very last second, it matters. Those conversations, if you're able to have those conversations, great. Go have those conversations. It does matter.
And Michael, I love what Jack was just describing in terms of being able to have these conversations in these moments where you're not asking the other person for anything, and it's really about wanting to give them something, but at the same time, seeing this character on this journey of trying to figure out how do I forgive myself and can I forgive myself, and how did that set up a lot of the scope of how you were developing this character and how you wanted to play him.
What Jack was saying is that it's never too late. And something that's interesting about boxing as a sport is there's no other sport where that's more true. I believe it's like the only a sport where you can literally be losing and making mistakes for every round, and in the last 10 seconds you can win it all.
Yeah.
Is if you don't give up. And I think that's why it's such a great metaphor for life, and for what Jack was saying is it ain't over till it's over. Have the conversation. It's not over until that bell rings,
Absolutely. And Nicolette, I wanted to just ask you about filming that first moment when Mike shows up at Jessica's door, because, she obviously doesn't anticipate him coming. And, we see that instant reaction of just all of the different emotions, the good and the bad, just kind of flooding straight into her. And, you can tell that it feels like the last conversation they had was 5 minutes before in terms of the emotional space. And so kind of how did you set about really finding where you felt like she would be in that moment?
Yeah, that was I think that was figuring out where she is in that moment kind of is what carried me through all of the scenes with him, because I think um, she's living with all these different emotions at the same time, seeing him for the first time. I think what's so beautiful about what Jack wrote with these characters is there's so much love and so much history and so many layers beneath the surface that, like, when we first meet them, we have to um, know that they've had years and years behind them, and then and really really feel the pain at that moment. And so I think for me, throughout all of the scenes, I had to carry the anger and I think I was always playing against softening to him as much as I could. And because she's a single mom and I mean, really her life completely changed because of his decisions. And so, um, I that scene was actually really challenging. I felt that was like one of the hardest scenes, I feel like. And because this is a very indie film and we didn't have like any time to film it, that scene, Jack, I mean, I feel
That
like,
was the hardest scene. That was so hard, wasn't it?
oh
Mm.
my God. Yeah, there was like no time for that scene. And so I didn't even know if we were gonna, I didn't know if we were gonna get it. I just felt
Well,
like,
we'd also done everything before, and we
yeah.
ended with the first scene. So I remember Michael and Nicolette were like, "What the hell? We're doing this now? What do you mean?" And I was like, "I'm so sorry. We have to do it now because we only have this location. We only have one day to do certain things." But it was funny because that's one of the beautiful things about an edit is I realized what was happening at that door was what Nicolette and Michael were just, what Nicolette was just describing is all of these layers and memories that are flooding back, not just to him, but to her too. So we were, editing between these memories, these shared memories between the two of them of trying to establish this entire life in a day. So it didn't necessarily that the scene had to work as a whole. It just had to find pieces of that scene because that's why we go in and out of voice and dialogue, because sometimes it's not what you say, it's how you say it. As long as you get that last moment where Michael says, please, please take a walk with me. And when Michael says that, it's the first time he's looked at her, even though she has all of this anger and all this hatred and, mixed emotions, she knows it's serious and she knows there's a reason he wants to take a walk with her, and that's why she agrees to do it. And I thought they did it just beautifully, beautifully.
Well, and also just because there's so much, I think as angry as she is, like at the same time, she just wants to like fall into his arms and weep and punch him and kiss him and all the things at the same
Yeah,
time, you know? Yeah.
yeah.
And was it helpful for the two of you, for you, Michael and Nicolette, in terms of also being able to film some of the memories of their relationship to really capture that sense and that essence of history? Because, as much as it ended in a really bad place and there is that anger and that frustration that it exists from her side, there are also still those memories of the moments where it was good. And there's a reason that they fell in love in the first place.
Absolutely. You want to talk, Mikey? I've been
Yeah, I
talking.
mean, it was extremely helpful. Every memory, I think, just put another layer for me as an actor to the subtext. I mean, it's one thing to be thinking about it while you're alone in your room and trying to cover all your bases of what is the humanity of this character, what are their regrets, but then being able to shoot those flashbacks absolutely elevated the subtext of everything that I was doing.
And the cool thing is when we were doing that last scene is we discussed, we said, when you break up with someone or you have a, turbulent relationship, you tend to focus on all the shit, all the bad stuff that happened, all the turmoil. And there's this line that Michael says, and he says it so honestly, is like, remember the good, remember it was good sometimes. And that's when Nicholas says, I know it was, because that's the final sentiment is, yeah, we know there was shit, but there was also some good. And it's finding those little moments of levity that we could perhaps focus on a little bit more. And I knew that I could hopefully do that a little bit more when I think about past things that I'm regretful of or things that went wrong. It's nice to remind an audience also that it's not all bad, there's good in there. Sometimes it's harder to find, but it is still good, there's still these beautiful moments.
That's to me why this was so heartbreaking, though, because there was so much good, and they were so drawn to each other. They had their whole lives ahead of themselves before, he made his decision and changed the trajectory of their entire lives. And so I think for me that what carried me through a lot of it as well was because I knew how amazing it could have been if they had carried on in the way that that things were going, even though they had their flaws and their passion and their anger and all that stuff. But yeah.
No, and I love that point about, even that there is always that element of good. And, Michael, I love the scene between you and Joe Pesci, playing his father, because there's so much hurt in your character in terms of what that relationship has been, the fact that he feels like nothing he did was ever good enough. His dad was never proud of him. And, there's kind of like this lost little boy still inside of him. And yet at the end, we have that beautiful moment where, Joe Pesci's character doesn't have the ability to speak or move, but he's able to like place his hand onto your hair. And so I just wanted to ask about, again, even having all the hurt in that emotion, all the hurt and all the emotion in that moment, how you also wanted to kind of really put forth that there is still love between them that he feels towards his father.
Yeah, I mean, I think that well, it always starts with the script, and so with Jack's script, you could see this was not a two-dimensional look at life, and I think very often we get stuck into this. Okay, he's a bad guy, he's a good guy, he's a bad father, and it's just two-dimensional. Life's not like that. Unfortunately, it's not like that. Like, it's way more complicated. And in the way Nicolette, I feel, I think, approached some of her trauma with Mikey. I approached the same thing with his father. It was an abusive relationship. He wasn't a good father. But I tried to put this great love underneath, underneath all the lines. This great love, this conflict, this tension, and I just think life is like that. And so, yeah. So I just basically,
Michael added that. Do you remember that line?
All the trauma.
And you say that line at the end that breaks my. I find it very hard watching that, because I think it's one of the most, actually every scene with these guys, but like, it's one of the most honest scenes and reminiscent. But when he leaves, he kisses him and says "Te amo, Papa," which is "I love you, Dad," and it's like, shit, it still gets me. It's beautiful. Those two, they're amazing.
Yeah. And in that scene as well, Jack, I love the fact that you have, Joe Pesci's actual singing voice and his music.
Yeah,
and,
man.
I heard that part of the connective of that moment existing in the scene kind of tied back to your own grandmother having suffered from dementia, but music being the one thing that could bring her back. And I was curious about just the moment that you kind of really thought about, what if we actually had his voice, and even though he can't speak and he can't move, like, it still kind of brings a light into his eyes in a different way in that moment.
Yeah, it's such it was sort of like one of those revelations, because I was coming up with the father figure, and I always wanted to have that moment of the regret for Mikey at that moment, is he never got to say this to him when he was of sound mind. And that's probably incredibly difficult. It's like, he's like, I'm still nervous speaking to you, and I know you can't hear me. But I think what you mentioned earlier with the hand, but I think the music, which, like you said, when my grandmother was suffering from it, used to bring her back into the room, and she'd suddenly look at you, and you'd realize that actually she did understand what you were saying. She had been listening. It's just, we hadn't registered. And I think it's a very curious, illness, dementia. I think we actually don't know the lengths of what it is, and to be inside that brain and what's going on, we might think they're not hearing any of it, but I wanted, and we discussed that, is when he hears his voice, it's almost like it wakes him from when I say the trance that he's in. And I said I didn't want it to go far, but when Mikey walks out the room and he looks back, there's one shot that I just kept. I made it very brief because I didn't want to go too far of it, where Joe looks around and you realize at that moment he heard everything, his regrets as a man, as a father, and it told us that he did love his son. So I thought, and that's the magic of Joe Pesci. Like, people can spend an entire film to get that sentiment that he got on a look last maybe a second and a half. I mean, shit. I mean, that was something.
Yeah, it's so great what it kind of conjures in that moment. And Nicolette, talking about music, I wanted to ask you about your musical performance in it, singing Have You Ever Seen the Rain? Because it's so beautiful, but it also channels so much for the character. And so I just wanted to ask about really stepping into, not how am I going to sing this, but how is Jessica going to sing it in this moment with everything that is going through her head in that point?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of always envisioned this song for a really long time when you first, that had always been in the script there in that moment. And I thought that was such a brilliant idea because nobody listens to that song and thinks to make that one into like a ballad at the piano. But I think it really is so fitting for the moment and for the characters. And um, it was an interesting process because while we were filming, I would go to the studio at night and start recording it and really just try to discover what it sounds like and what Jess's version of it is. And Jack had been I sat with Jack a few times and I just took notes as he was talking of like what he wanted that moment to be and what it should sound like and feel like. And so um, one of our producers, Josh Porter, he got me a keyboard to have in the hotel room while we were filming, and I would just sit at the keyboard and play it. And really, we just wanted it to get into my body, so it felt like a song that Jess knew really well from her past, because it's a song that Mikey mentions that he, would think about when he was in prison, and it was nice because when we actually did film it, Michael and I had a couple days of filming already together. And so we just had done so much together. So for me, I was able to also pull from those immediate memories for us. And then we shot it straight through about like what, 8 times, Jack?
No, we did it like 4 times.
Oh, 4 times. Yeah.
Well, no, but we did like the full song, which I did this very long push in, like all the way from the back, because I want it all the way through.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, like that, talk about chills, like everybody in that room was, because it's everybody heard that song I think we used the first take as well. Like it was like one of those ones where we did a couple more for safety, but like actually sometimes you're like, when you got it, you got it. Let's rock, let's move on. And every time without fail, Nicolette, because like she said, we had those scenes with her and Michael, which were, heartbreaking, that they had been through that day together, that when it comes to the end of that song, what that's happening is that's her way of forgiving him, that song. Because he said that was the song that reminded, him of her, and it was his safety net. It's like when you can't sleep, I got to think about the most comforting thing in the world, and that was Jess singing that song to Sasha, and she understood what that song meant to him. So even though he's not there, that's her way of expelling all of that hatred and all of that guilt and all the rest of it. So it becomes very pure. And at the end of that song with the tear, and I always said that, which me and Nicolette discussed, is when she goes back to the house and she says, "Get up, your father's fighting." That's the first time she ever called him her father. It's the first time she ever would have said those words. And that was a way of telling us that now he's her father again, which, that broke my heart.
Yeah. Michael, one of the things that really struck me in your performance as well is, we're with your character and we're living with him for several minutes in the movie before there's ever even a line of dialogue. And there's so much introspect that I feel like your performance carries us into. And so I just wanted to ask about, kind of Jack really giving you that space to have all of these moments where it's not about the dialogue, but it's really just about, that internalized side of the character.
Yeah, I mean, I was I've said this before in interviews, but I can't say it enough. It's the first time I've been able to, for a very long time, where I've felt like I can just be an actor, where I can trust my director, and there's a mutual respect there, and he's gonna guide me if I go off track, but other than that, he's gonna just let me out the gate and do what I do. And that was just such a, I mean, I'm so grateful to be able to do that. And I hope that cinema gets back to that. You know, I don't want to be a producer. I don't want to be a writer. I love being an actor. I love my craft. And in cinema, that's what you can do that you can't do in theater. You can just one look can be 1,000 words, and it's just about the subtext and everything that's going through your mind.
Yeah, you know, and Jack, obviously, when you have someone like Michael who can kind of evoke so much in just those small looks, you know, did you find yourself almost like pulling back even more on the dialogue and allowing for more of those moments? Or when you were writing the script, was that something that was always important to you for the silence to speak just as much as the words?
Equal, as Michael was saying. It's funny that you know, I consider actors, specifically these actors, all of them were like the thoroughbreds, like Michael was saying, that the signing gates, once you open up the gates, let them run. I never wanted to be somebody to say no. I wanted to be somebody who like, I believe that when you give someone a part, it's theirs, they own it. That's the beauty of this. Like, they can then from there elevate that in such a way that I love to be surprised. I think it's the most beautiful thing. I think when somebody is cast in that role, it's theirs to witness. You know, it's our job to witness that role, like to try to find the least intrusive way of watching this person exist. So, you know, the beauty about this is that is where you really can, like, your job is like, go, run, have the best time, like, feel free, do what your instincts tell you. Like Mike said, if it's going off the wrong way, it's a bit like music. It's playing a wrong note. We both hear it. We both say, oh, well, maybe let's edge back this way. This is what. But I always was like, this is what I love. Never be like, I didn't like that. I'd never say something like that because I don't like when people close something off. I think, you know, there's a reason why you explore certain things. And I tell you what, it's amazing when you do allow actors to just exist and feel confident in what they're doing, because that's where the beauty happens in front of the camera. I mean, like, I was watching these scenes and I was almost afraid to yell cut, because it felt like you burst a bubble that they created. And it's like nobody else, we didn't exist. You don't want to whisper without it, like, you know, to shatter the illusion. It was so real. It was so honest. But, you know, these guys they're magic. That's the truth. When they say the magic of cinema, that's what I felt all the time. It was watching magic being created before my eyes. That was beautiful.
And Nicolette, in talking about Jessica's relationship with her daughter, you know, part of what comes out of the conversation with Mike for her is that it kind of changes her perspective on certain things with her daughter. You know, she's been desperately wanting to walk her to school every day and thinking that she was embarrassed of her and didn't want to be around her. And then she realizes it's actually because she just wanted that moment to wave to her dad in the morning outside of the play
Yeah.
dates across the street. And so how did you feel like the conversation that she ends up having with Mike also really shifts things for her daughter, for that moment where we do see the two of you sitting down and watching his fight together?
Yeah, it's I imagine, I think, or the way that I sort of played it in my head was that there is a healing that comes ultimately. And I just loved that scene in the diner, to be able to talk about our daughter, because I feel like Jessica, it's so funny also, by the way. I feel like now we call her Jessica because in the script she was Jess, but
Yeah.
Michael is the
Loved.
one that speaks my name, and Michael created Jessica. Like, you started calling
Yeah.
as like a term of, as like, you know, you're the one that calls me by my full name. And so
Yes. So
I just
great.
love that. But you named me for this film. But I loved that scene because I feel like Jess is very isolated, you know, and this relationship that she has with her daughter, it was suddenly suddenly she became this single mom so quickly, and was isolated, and was just suddenly raising her by herself, and didn't have access to communicating really with her husband. And so this scene, even though she carries so much resentment towards him. I think being able to talk to him about her daughter, about their daughter, is really it unlocks something within her as well. And then obviously they're the day that they carry on, she finds her way to a little bit more healing so that she can also give her daughter some more healing with her father.
And
It's
Michael,
amazing the thing. Sorry, with Jess and what we talked about. I always remember my mother when my father left when I was a kid, and I I never saw my mother with another man in my entire life. She's never been with anybody else. Then he left when I was really young, but she's never ever had a boyfriend, never anybody else. She hates him, but she loves him. And that's the most amazing thing, is people are able to do that, which I think is an incredible thing. Sometimes love is so deep that it can carry you through a lifetime, which is so profound to me. I'm like, what an amazing thing. And we were talking about that early on, me and Nicolette, and it's you know, you go through those waves, but it's amazing how they conjured up that love, these two, in such a short space of time. I look at it and I say, that's a real relationship right there. It was unbelievable.
I love that. You know, Michael, also kind of going back to what you were talking about before about Jack really kind of creating a space for you to just kind of be able to lean into your performance. I wanted to ask about the scope of filming the fight sequence at the end, because it's so beautifully done. And I know that you only had a day and a half to shoot it, but you'd spent about a year kind of training specifically in the lead up to it. And just wanted to ask about how the way that Jack filmed with like 3 cameras, just to really be able to capture everything in the moment, you know, in the space that he created, really set up a lot of the dynamic of what that ended up looking like as a scene.
Yeah, I mean, I had mentioned early on to Jack and also to the stunt guys. I didn't want to do like, I didn't want to have stunt guys. I didn't want to. I basically I looked at some boxing movies and I'm like, the audiences, they've seen everything now. They're too intelligent. We're too small of a production. We're not going to have a lot of time. We have to do something different. And I really want to make contact. So in other words, you know, we hit each other. That would make any director freak out. I was like, I said to Jack, if you can keep it to the end, or close to the end, then we don't have to worry about me getting hurt. And to his credit, I mean, he jumped on board with that. I think we went through 3 different teams till we found Cameron, who's my opponent, and also Mike Piles, who worked, you know, trained me to get someone to do this. And we did it. And basically, it was ding, ding, ding at the beginning of the day. I don't remember ever hearing action or cut. I was just fighting all day, and Jack was literally in the ring fighting to get his shots all day.
No other actor, by the way. One has to understand, and we understand it as actors, what that actually entails. But I can guarantee you there is not another actor, maybe Daniel Day-Lewis, but I don't know. I even think Daniel would have a hard time with this. I'm saying, like, what Michael did, because he knew we had such a short amount of time, to put yourself in that position is so unbelievable. And I don't know whether or not it says I'm a good person or a bad person that I allowed him to do it. But I am saying I really, really wanted to get a great fight, and that Mike was willing to do that for the movie, to put himself in that position for the movie, because the authenticity meant so. We'd been through an entire, you know, this journey, and this was our last bit. We get this, we got the movie. And I was like, we got the fucking movie, but we don't have the fight. What are we going to do if we don't have the fight? And then we got to shoot that. And
also another great thing is that there was no major injury.
Yeah, there was none. It was unbelievable.
Which is
I just promised him steak and just go and have an amazing dinner each night. Just went and fed you.
I love it. I think it, you know, it's so palpable how that scene feels, and so I love hearing the details that went into that. And it's such a beautiful film. So congratulations to all three of you
Thank
on this,
you.
and thank you so much.
Mara, thank you so much.
Thank you,
What a pleasure
Mara.
speaking to you. You've said some amazing questions that we've never heard before. We've done a lot of these, so thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Thank you.